attention, converting homosexuals into heterosexuals. Is it God's will to convert homosexuals? Can gay people turn straight? Do they even have a choice? News 13 Susan Monday examines the age-old question of nature versus nurture in a special report on the controversial movement that has people asking the conversion question. Tuesday at 11, exclusively on News 13 WLOS. The new vaccines, tonight at 11 on News 13.
From ABC News, Washington. This week, with Sam Donaldson and Cokie Roberts, featuring George Will, and our roundtable with ABC News analysts George Stephanopoulos and Bill Crystal.
This week, in the wake of an election that rocked the Republican Party, Newt Gingrich gives up the speakership and plans to leave Congress. We'll talk with the front runner in the battle to replace Gingrich, Congressman Bob Livingston of Louisiana, in a Sunday morning exclusive.
And we'll talk with two men contesting other House leadership posts, GOP Conference Chairman John Boehner, Representative J.C. Watts of Oklahoma. Election fallout and the struggle for Republican leadership this Sunday morning. Good morning. What a week it has been. The Democrats pick up seats in the House of Representatives, hold their own in the Senate, and before the week was out, Newt Gingrich was gone from the speakership, from the Congress. We are very pleased to have with us this morning the man most likely to succeed him as Speaker, Bob Livingston, Chairman of the Appropriations Committee from my home state of Louisiana, and the only current member of the Republican leadership on a Sunday morning program, John Boehner of Ohio, and one of the people challenging him, Sam.
Well, Cokie, it's hard to overestimate the turmoil in the ranks of House Republicans now as they move to select a new leader and perhaps new leaders. Let's take a look at the announced candidates for the leadership posts. There is, of course, running for Speaker Bob Livingston of Louisiana and Christopher Cox of California. Running for the post of Majority Leader, Dick Armey of Texas, who is the present Majority Leader, and Steve Largent of Oklahoma. Running for the post of House Republican Conference Chairman, John Boehner of Ohio, who is the present Chairman, and he's being challenged by J.C. Watts Jr. of Oklahoma and George Radonovich of California. Now, those are the announced candidates.
Right. There
could be others that come out in the next day or two.
Absolutely. You just hold your seats. This could be a wild ride.
It could be, but we're pleased this morning to welcome Bob Livingston of Louisiana, who is the front runner to be Speaker. And joining us, as always, in the questioning, George Will. Mr. Livingston, why do you want to be Speaker?
Because I have enjoyed serving in the Congress for the last 21 years, and I want to see the Congress continue to prosper for America, but I also want to see the Republican Party prosper for America, and I got concerned in the elections the other day, when we lost seats, when we were expecting to pick up about 15 or 20 seats. We didn't do as well as was expected. And immediately the next day we started doing some soul searching. And on the basis of that soul searching, I finally decided to throw my hat in the ring and try to create an environment in which Republicans will be the majority party for the millennium.
Why don't you think you did any better? I mean, some people say it was because you didn't have a message and the message that you had was too ideological. Other people say you didn't have a message because you weren't conservatively ideological enough.
No, I think that we can always be criticized from all corners of the philosophical spectrum.
You are being.
And we will be, and we will be forever. But the point is, we are the majority, have been the majority for the last 4 years, thanks to my friend Newt Gingrich. I doubt that had Newt Gingrich not been the revolutionary that he was, that we would have ever taken the majority status. But we did with his guidance. He was the man that created the situation in which it enabled us to become the majority party in the Congress and the majority party in the nation. In effect, we've got a majority of governors, we've got we break even on state houses, state legislatures, we've got a majority in the Senate, we've got a majority in the House today. But the problem is we're losing momentum, Sam. And what we don't want to do is be a minority party in 2 years, and my speaker's race was integral to our keeping the majority.
Now, Mr. Livingston, before I move on and relinquish my time to my colleagues, the question is, a lot of people are asking, do you have the temperament to be Speaker? And you know what's coming, because we warned you. We were about to play that moment on the House floor when a lot of people think you simply lost it. Let's take a look at that moment.
As Winston Churchill says, we will never, never, never give in. We will stay here till doomsday. Defeat this motion to recommit and pass this continuing resolution. And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas indeed. What do you have to say about that?
Merry Christmas.
And that was the government shutdown, we should point out.
The part that you didn't see was that I was laughing going into that thing, and I was laughing coming out. And unfortunately, my mother didn't see either end of that. She called me immediately, and she said, "Hey, you look like a lunatic. Don't do that again." And I didn't do it again. I haven't done it. I won't do it. I promise, when I'm Speaker, I will never do it again.
My mother used to say the same thing to me.
Yours.
Not about you, about me. Okay.
Sam raised a question, though, Mr. Chairman, about this question of criticism from both sides. And there are conservatives in the Congress, in the caucus, who basically wanted to get rid of Speaker Gingrich because they thought he was too moderate, that he wasn't doing a conservative enough agenda. Are you the man to answer their concerns?
Well, first of all, I'd say that I don't think that Newt Gingrich was out of kilter with the Republican Party on philosophy at all. He had the philosophy. He clearly articulated that philosophy of smaller government, lower taxes, more responsiveness to the American people, the ability to give people an opportunity to have quality education and great retirement and health care.
But they were unhappy.
But they were unhappy because Congress had lost its ability to deliver the message and deliver the legislation to back up the message. What we want to do under my speakership, if my friends will elect me Speaker, is not only articulate the message, but to provide the legislative machinery that it takes to back it up and put it through Congress and write it into law. Yes, with a Democrat president. Yes, with the Democrat minority in both houses. I intend to reach out and bring anybody who wants to together to formulate the legislation that we need that will enhance the quality of life for all American citizens, but under Republican guidelines.
Now, they say that's exactly what worries them, that you will go across the aisle too much and put together coalitions with Democrats. Is there any danger that they would vote against you come January, not in this election in November, but when the full House meets in January, vote with the Democrats?
If they want to be in a minority party, I suppose some people could vote against me, as some Republicans could. But the point is that we are going to be the majority party this year, with a margin of only 6 votes. The last 2 years, we had a margin of only 12 votes. I know George Will is going to just about nail me in about a minute, and he's going to say we haven't been purist enough. But when you have slim margins of 12 or 6 votes, you can't do everything that you want. We are not a monolithic society. Our forefathers wrote a constitution that gave us the opportunity to settle our differences by compromise, not by dictate. If I were George Will, I could say how the world should be run. But unfortunately, with a margin of only 6 votes in this coming Congress, I've got to work with people who don't believe the same way I do.
Let's let him say what he's going to say.
John Alden, speak for yourself.
Speaking for what Mr. Gingrich calls the perfectionist caucus, a number of Republicans, as you know, were depressed, and some of them evidently stayed home on Election Day because of the $520 billion omnibus bill at the end of the season. They call it a budget train wreck, and you're sort of in charge of the appropriations process. Republicans who dislike the result and who hate the process, who say that because Livingston and others didn't obey the law, didn't get the appropriations bills done when the law says to, they wound up in October late and with no leverage in dealing with the president. And they say, why should we elect the man who was the engineer of that train wreck?
Well, I don't know which group of people you're talking about. Are you talking about the people that stayed home from the polls? If the people that stayed home from the polls because they're sulking, because they didn't get everything they wanted, they created a situation where they'll get less of what they want because now there are more Democrats than there are Republicans.
But what do you say to those who say this was a train wreck, appalling, and that you were a major player?
It wasn't a train wreck. The fact is, we got out of session. We had the first balanced budget in 30 years. We had the first tax cut in 16 years. We just missed having the second tax cut in 16 years. We had tremendous educational changes for the country, which we hope will improve the quality of education in this country. The fact is, this was a successful Congress, George, but we did muddle the message by doing exactly what you said. I felt from the beginning that we had too many holidays, we weren't working hard enough, we should have passed the appropriations bills, and we were prepared to earlier, but we got tangled up in a budget debate that was absolutely meaningless because we didn't have the Senate with us. All of these could have been prevented with, in my opinion, a little bit different tact in leadership and a lot different tact in management. And I am running as a leader and as a manager, and I intend to change that and to make sure that we never make that mistake again.
We have to take a break here, but you're not saying you like that $500 billion omnibus bill.
You're right. In fact, if you saw my speech on the floor, I said, this is ugly, but we got to pass it and get out of here and go get reelected. And the American people saw that it was ugly, and they didn't give us the votes that we had expected that they would give us. It was unfortunately the fault of a management style that kind of brought us to that problem.
All right, well, we'll get some more questions for Congressman Livingston when we come back in just a moment.
From ABC News. This Week with Sam Donaldson and Cokie Roberts. Brought to you by GE. From aircraft engines to appliances, we bring good things to life.
We're back with Representative Bob Livingston, running for the top leadership posts among House Republicans and thus for Speaker. Mr. Livingston, was this last election a referendum on impeachment? And if so, is the president now home free?
Well, I don't know if he's home free or not. I haven't been part of the Judiciary Committee's deliberations, and Henry Hyde will have a lot to say about that in the coming weeks. And as a person who believes in the system and who believes in the committee process, I intend to rely heavily on Henry's recommendations and the recommendations of the Judiciary Committee. But I would have to say that the president has still to answer to the American people for the charges. And the charges are that he lied and that he lied under oath. And I think that's very serious when one considers that it is a felony to lie under oath.
Well, is it conceivable, given the election returns and what appears to be the mood of the country, judged in the public opinion polls, that that committee would, in fact, vote out articles of impeachment, and the House would, in effect, vote a bill or presentation to the Senate?
I think that the American people have certainly indicated in the polls that they don't see it as an impeachable or dismissible offense. And that would have to be considered in the political arena. But still in all, we cannot simply disregard the fact that there are other people in our society, in the military and in various other walks of life, as CEOs or principals of schools, who have been likewise charged and have lost their jobs.
Do you think there should be articles of impeachment?
I'll wait to see what Henry Hyde recommends, but I'm prepared to vote to uphold my role under the Constitution.
Which means what?
Which means that if the evidence is there, I will vote for it.
In a Newsweek poll, 70% of the people, including half of the Republicans, said that the Republicans' handling of the Lewinsky matter is the reason for their poor showing in the polls on Tuesday. Do you agree with that?
I don't know. I mean, I personally was trying to get my appropriations bills out, trying to get them out in an ugly and sloppy way, but albeit because we were pressed because of the schedule. And I wasn't paying that much attention to what was going on. And I frankly, I think that the American people are ultimately the final arbiters, the final judges of our performance, and obviously they have decided that we didn't do a good enough job.
When you weren't pressed by the schedule in passing this omnibus bill that you yourself call ugly, when you had ample time, I guess the second biggest legislative achievement of the year was the $217 billion highway bill passed by Mr. Schuster that most people think sets a world indoor record for pork. Should the Republican Party that controls Congress be proud of that bill?
To the credit of Budget Chairman John Kasich, he was dead set against that bill, and he was right.
How about Mr. Livingston was opposed also?
Livingston was opposed in the preliminary things. I ended up voting for the final bill. And can only say a lot of people are going to have highways because of that bill.
And
a lot of people are going to have jobs because of that bill. And a lot of people are going to be better off throughout America because of that bill. It was an expensive bill, but it was our priority to build highways, and we ultimately will probably look back on that bill as saying it was a darn good thing we did. We look back on the 50s saying that, my goodness, that national highway system of ours was sure expensive, but I'm glad we got it.
Good bill is what you're saying. Good
I think history will write that it's a good thing we did.
Okay. You say we balanced the budget, and that's a very good thing. The tax burden as a percentage of GDP is now higher than it's been in 50 years.
Right.
And the defense budget as a percentage of GDP is the lowest it's been in 50 years. Now, someone had said, vote Republican and you'll get the highest tax burden and the lowest defense. People would say, why do we want to do that? I mean, why is that a record to go to conservatives and to the base of your party and say, this is what we did?
Look, we have consistent goals that we're going to stick to, and that is to reduce the cost of government. We have done that in the last 4 years. We have held the cost of government by $125 billion under what President Clinton projected it would have grown by back in 1994 in his budget analysis. We have provided the first balanced budget. We have created an environment in which interest rates are the lowest that they have been. Wait, George. The inflation rate is virtually non-existent because we have performed. Wall Street has liked it. There's more finance. There's more jobs. There's more productivity around this country. We are the beacons of progress throughout the world. Now, in the future, we're going to not only try to balance the budget, we're going to have tax cuts. We need tax cuts, and we're going to deliver.
Whenever Republicans propose a tax cut from here on in, the president will say they're robbing Social Security. We want to save every penny to save Social Security. Won't that trump you?
You know, George, I'm glad you asked that.
Well,
because in 1967, President Johnson changed the rules, the budget rules, so that they could mask the cost of the Vietnam War and put Social Security on budget.
Would you like to take it off?
I'm introducing a bill in the first day of Congress to change that.
Which means we don't have a balanced budget now. That means we're $28 billion
We might be a couple of $1 billion low this last year, but we're under Johnson's budget rules. We will be under the new budget rules come after the passage of this thing, and we will no longer. I want to make sure everybody understands this.
Take whatever time the gentleman requires.
Thank you. Good orderly congressional procedure. We will no longer use Social Security proceeds to mask the budget deficit.
Speaker Gingrich said the Republican Party was engaging in cannibalism. Are your colleagues engaging in cannibalism now as they go into this election?
No, we're just reworking the process. And I have to say that I have the highest regard for the man who really is my friend, Newt Gingrich. He's a man of Churchillian proportions. He has changed American history for the better, I believe. But he is a revolutionary. I am a manager. They are two different types of leadership, and I hope that mine will be what we need to project the Republican Party into the future.
He may be your dear friend, but let the record show you announced to oppose him before he withdrew.
I did.
All right.
Because I thought it was important that we make the change.
And before we go, the horse race question. You're the front runner, we called you. Do you have the votes to win?
I will be the next speaker, I believe. I have over 100 votes or so now, and I need about 112, and I'll have them probably within the next 2 days.
Thank you very much, Representative Bob Livingston, for being with us today. Come back, won't you?
Thank you very much.
Speaker or not speaker, you're always welcome. Next, Oklahoma Republican J.C. Watts, and later, Representative John Boehner, chairman of the House Republican Conference.
Joining us now from Dallas is Representative J.C. Watts of Oklahoma. Thank you so much for being with us, Mr. Watts.
My pleasure.
You are running for conference chairman of the Republican Conference against the sitting chairman, John Boehner. Why are you doing that?
Well, Koki, I said after the elections that I felt like we needed to, when you lose market share, which we've done in 96 and 98, I felt like you need to look at everything from the CEO to the janitor. And I am making myself available and announce my candidacy to become the next chairman of the conference, to give people an opportunity to look at what I'm proposing to do or what I will be proposing to do, and let them have the choice. And, you know, win, lose, or draw, I'm willing to work with whoever the conference chairman is to bring about some real changes and to make us more effective, more efficient, more productive, and you know, help us to get our message out there and tell the American people what's really happening.
When you talk about your message, as we were talking earlier, there seem to be two strains of dissidents. Those who are saying that the party was not conservative enough, was not ideological enough, and those who were saying that no, it needed to be more pragmatic, reaching out to more types of people. Which side do you put yourself on?
Well, you know, I think we can be, you know, ideological, and at the same time, I think we can reach out. I think basically what we have to do, and of course, Koki, feel like I've been beating my head on the wall for the last 4 years and saying that we've got to reach out. We've got to go to those non-traditional communities and say, these are our values, these are our principles. How do we help you accomplish what you want to accomplish in life? And I think we've got two pretty good examples to look to from November 3rd to prove that theory. We can look at examples in New York and California that we didn't reach out to those non-traditional communities and what happened, and look to Texas and Florida where they did reach out to those non-traditional communities and they had tremendous success. So I think there's room to be ideological, and I think there's room to reach out as well.
Well, Mr. Watts, you saw what happened last Tuesday. African Americans voted in most places overwhelmingly for Democratic candidates. Do the Republicans as a national party have any chance of increasing their share of that vote?
I think we do, Sam. I think there are many African Americans out there, minorities out there, and again, I think the 4th District of Oklahoma, you can come down to my district, and that theory is proven. What I've just talked about. In 1994, I won 3 out of 11 counties. In 1996, I won 8 out of 11 counties. And in 1998, I won 11 out of 11 counties. And I did that by giving people a seat at the table, allowing them to be a part of the process, and building relationships. And, you know, that works in whatever you're doing, politics, business, outreach in your church, your Senate, that works in whatever you're doing.
You know your colleagues very well. In the election next week, when you're running for conference chairman, the fact that you're African American, is it a plus, is it a minus, or neutral?
Well, I think, Sam, I think my colleagues are going to pay less attention to my skin color, and they're going to pay a whole lot more attention to what I personally have worked on in the last 4 years, what I've accomplished, what I have talked about. You know, I hadn't just talked about this outreach thing. I've done it. I've executed the game plan. And, you know, I've been out front on taxes. I was out front on welfare reform. I was out front on balancing the budget. I've been involved in creating more in our military spending. So I think I've got enough track record there that my colleagues can judge me on my merits, which I feel like that's what they've done over the last 4 years.
Mr. Watts, 2 years ago in the state of California, where about 1/8 of the American electorate lives, they voted the California Civil Rights Initiative to ban racial preferences by government. Last Tuesday in Washington, a fairly liberal state, although outspent 4-1 and opposed by virtually the entire state establishment, a similar measure passed handily. A lot of Republicans believe that that's the way to go, to mandate a colorblind society, to get rid of the identity politics of racial preferences and all the rest. What do you think of that?
George, I have no problem with that. I have been very consistent in saying that we should have a colorblind society. However, at the same time, I think the flip side of that coin is that we don't have a colorblind society. I think we should do away with racial and gender-based preferences. I have no problem with that, but at the same time, I think we have to have a system or something in place that would say if George Will and J.C. Watts both apply for the job, or we both apply for the contract, that if George Will gets the contract, I can walk away and say, yes, the white guy got the contract, but I think it was a fair deal, and vice versa. If I get it, I think you should be able to walk away and saying, yes, the black guy got it, and I think it was a fair deal. And I don't think we're there yet. And what I've said to my Republican colleagues on the federal level, and anyone else that's willing to listen, that I think we have to be careful in how we proceed, that we make sure that we're doing this thing the right way. And also, I think it should probably, I think it's better handled on a state level as opposed to a federal level, because on a federal level, you've got some politician that you don't know talking about being anti
Congressman?
something, which the wrong message could be given in that fashion.
Congressman, before you leave, who are you for Speaker?
Well, I have said to Bob Livingston, I've talked to Bob Livingston, I've talked to Chris Cox, I've talked to Jim Talent, and I have said to all of those men that I would keep my powder dry. Before I knew who was getting in the race, I said, and I encourage my colleagues, keep your powder dry. Let's get back to Washington on November 18th. Let's listen to the different options that we have, and let's make a decision.
Thank you very much, Congressman Watts. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Next, House Republican Conference Chair John Boehner, and later, Bill Kristol and George Stephanopoulos are at the ready, and we'll all be eating a little humble pie in our roundtable.
Joining us now is Representative John Boehner, who's chairman of the House Republican Conference. Welcome.
Sam, good morning.
Well, it's good to see you. Now, you're an incumbent in the sense that you are the chairman at the moment. You want to retain your chairmanship, but why shouldn't people who say it was the leaders that cost us this last election say off with their heads, including Boehner's?
Well, I think the members are upset with what happened in the election, and there's been some concerns about how we've managed the House over the 4 years that we've been in charge. There's no questions about that. But I think that most members of the conference really believe that with Newt's decision to leave, that it's enough change. That the problems in terms of managing the House were mostly in the Speaker's office. What we need to do at this point in time is to regroup, get our agenda put together, our issues together, and from the agenda and issues, put a message together that we can work on with our colleagues in the Senate and the Republican governors around the country who've been very successful.
Well, what are you saying? If you fire the engineer, the fireman, the brakeman, they can all stay?
Well, I think that there's got to be a decision about how much change we're going to have. We're clearly going to have a new Speaker. I think that the services that I've provided with my staff to the members are respected by the members, and I expect that I'll have a successful re-election.
Well, do any of those concerns you spoke of toward the leadership apply to you? Do you think you did anything, looking back, if you'd done it differently, would have helped last Tuesday?
Well, I don't think it's any secret to anyone that the Speaker and I had our share of disagreements over the last 4 years about how we operated. And when you look at our vision of expanding freedoms for the American people, requiring more personal responsibility, and we've got the right vision for the vast majority of the American people. But what we've got to be able to do is put an agenda together and issues together, and then from that a message to go out and talk about our vision. And then internally, we've got to manage the House in a much different way. There were no clear lines of responsibility in the leadership, no clear lines of accountability, and I think that has to be changed, and I think Bob Livingston is the person who can bring those management skills to the leadership.
So you're supporting him?
I am.
The question, though, you talk about an agenda, and that we come back to that issue of, is the agenda that some of your troops want the agenda that's going to be successful, an agenda having to do with social issues like abortion, school prayer, etc. Is that an agenda that will work?
Well, Cookie, I think that the agenda has to be developed from the bottom up. We've spent an awful lot of time over the last 4 years mostly bringing an agenda from the top down, and that just doesn't work. We've got an institution with 435 members. Trying to manage it is very difficult, and as most people have described it, it's like herding cats. And what we've got to do, especially with a narrow majority, is that we've got to develop more consensus, and that means bringing it from the bottom up. But we have an agenda that I think 2/3 of the members of the House basically support. And if you look all the way through the contract with America, that revolutionary document, 75% of the members of the House voted for all of the bills in the contract with America on average.
Let me ask you about the Newsweek poll that says 70% said it was the handling of the Lewinsky matter that cost you seats. You think that's true?
I think that it's certainly been problematic. The whole issue is problematic for the country. And like most Americans, they just want it to go away.
So what happens? Will there be impeachment?
I don't know. I think the members have great confidence in Henry Hyde and the committee to conduct a fair and independent review and make a recommendation to the House. And when they do, we'll have a chance to decide whether the House is going to proceed or not.
And so you'll do what he recommends?
I think that the majority of the committee will make a decision on behalf of the House, and it'll come to us, and we'll have to take it from there.
In your answer to Sam, you seem to be saying that the problem in the House this year was something wrong with the organizational chart. The lines weren't quite right. Is that how you get to the Bud Schuster's highway bill and to the $500 billion bill at the end of the session? It was just a procedural problem?
Well, George, there was really no clear agenda for the year. When there's no agenda and there's no real direction, what happens is you really can't have a message. You can put lipstick on a pig all day long, but it's still a pig. And the fact is that the highway bill, for the first time in history, spent all of the highway tax money for its intended purpose. Now, I didn't vote for the bill because I just think members of Congress loading up these bills with pork is inappropriate and ought to come to a stop. And if you take the budget bill in the end, it was a great example of what I was referring to. We made a decision in January with the Senate leadership that we were going to move the budget early, that we were going to move the appropriation bills early. We're going to do the most difficult ones first so that we would have this skirmish with the president during the summer. And what happened was it never got implemented. We tried to avoid negotiating with the president in early October while he had a gun to our head. That's what happened, and as a result...
Just to be clear, what you were vowing was to obey the law, right? I mean, the law says you're supposed to do certain things, say, by June 30th.
George, no one's paid attention to the Budget Act since it was enacted.
Everyone does it, I know.
And in the end, it's about leadership providing leadership.
Let's talk about tax cuts. That used to be under the Reagan Republicanism. That was the message was right there. Is it fair to say that you have met the enemy and he is your Republican contingent in the Senate?
I don't think so. I think that what we need to do is spend more time working between both chambers and building more consensus about our agenda and about our direction together. We got Republican governors now in 31 states who won overwhelmingly with big numbers last Tuesday night. They've been very successful. We need to bring them and the Republican leaders in the Senate together to have a unified agenda as we go into the year 2000. We've got a very big election coming. We've got a very good story. But what we need to do is to make it very clear and to have all the voices singing off the same page of the hymnal.
Mr. Boehner, thank you very much for being with us. We'll say to you what we said to Mr. Livingston. Whether you retain your chairmanship or not, you're welcome back.
Thank you.
And next, our weekly roundtable with ABC News analyst Bill Kristol and George Stephanopoulos in a moment.
Well, Newt Gingrich, who in some ways has dominated our politics, certainly at least as much as Bill Clinton has for the last several years, is now gone. Gone from the speakership and soon to be gone from the Congress. It's almost unfathomable. Bill Kristol, George Stephanopoulos, what do we make of it? Bill, you've been a thorn in Newt Gingrich's side.
I was a friend and then a thorn. I guess in that respect, I was like a lot of other Republicans.
Your dear friend?
No, I'm not a dear friend, a remote friend. I was told by one Republican today that George W. Bush, in a conversation with a Republican congressman earlier this week, after Tuesday night, after Election Day, said, look, I'm probably going to run for president. I think I can get the nomination. If I lose the presidency to Al Gore, I want it to be because of my own mistakes, not because of Newt Gingrich. I think that was the decisive thing. 2000 is a dicey proposition. The presidency is a big question mark. If the Republicans lose the presidency, they're likely to lose the House as well, given how tightly balanced it is now, and maybe the Senate. And they just did not want to risk having Newt Gingrich there, obstructing their message and just being an unpopular voice for the party. And I think that's the key reason he's gone. It's not ideology. It's not a particular decision he made. They just did not want to go into 2000 with Gingrich.
Let's take a look at the news magazines. There are a couple of them this week, and the covers. The loser, you know, the fall of Newt, and the pictures look so downcast.
Well, and of course he's been on the cover of those magazines in triumphant poses.
Yeah, but let me just make the point before I get to you, George, that losing generals are replaced. It may not be their fault, it may be their fault, but they're out. And sometimes they're executed, as a matter of fact. And I agree with you.
Not generally
Newt
in this
Gingrich
country.
rubbed people the wrong way. I know something about that, and it happens. And he's got to take the fall.
But that's not why he's left. I mean, I'll disagree with Bill by agreeing with something he said a month ago. There was a single decision that cost Newt Gingrich a speakership. It came on October 8th. The Republicans decided to go forward with an impeachment resolution in a partisan way. Only 31 Democrats. Had they had a bipartisan impeachment resolution of 425 to 5 vote, Newt Gingrich would still be Speaker.
Well, George,
That's an
I'm a little
interesting
confused, if I may. I saw the Newsweek poll also, 70% said, but I don't believe that people turned out Carol Moseley Braun because they wanted to send a message, impeach the president, or re-elected George W. Bush by that huge, some districts maybe.
I agree with both those
this election as a total vindication for Bill Clinton is not
I didn't
realistic.
say that, but it was a total rejection of impeachment. And you're right about the 2 races you cited, but if you look at the House races, the toss-up races where Republicans ran impeachment ads, they lost all 4 of them. The races where Democratic challengers, Jay Inslee and Russ Holt, Washington, New Jersey, ran impeachment ads against the Republicans, they won.
Well, some yes, some no. They were also running New Mexico against Republicans. She won.
You believe he's home free now? The president's home free?
I believe impeachment's over. I think that's clear.
George, does this solve the Republican problems to get rid of Newt Gingrich?
It solves a problem. That is, I would disagree with Bill. I don't think it's, or George, I don't think it's 1 strike and he's out. I think, obviously, the impeachment decision was wrong, but there were 2 others for 3 strikes and you're out. One is the omnibus bill at the end of the session, and the other was the government shutdown in '95. There were 3 calamitous decisions. But there was a visceral reaction now. I'm not talking about justice or injustice. It was just a visceral reaction to Newt Gingrich, and he had to go. What will solve the Republicans' problem is to get a presidential nominee. You cannot present a party to the country with the cacophonous voice of the House majority or the Senate majority.
Which is something Democrats learned the hard way for many years.
Right.
Koki, what's your take on that?
I do think, though, that the Republicans are going to be in an interesting fight now, because you are going to have the people on one side saying it was because we weren't ideological enough, or as you would say, didn't have enough ideas, and then the others saying that you have to be more pragmatic. And I went through and looked at the winning Republicans, and J.C. Watts gave some sense of this. The 2 Bush brothers got more than half the Hispanic vote, 1/4 of the black vote. Kit Bond in Missouri, who had originally seemed to be in a tough race, got 1/3 of the black vote. In New York, as he said, in New York and California, where the Republicans didn't reach out at all, they lost badly. In the South, there were some mitigating circumstances called lotteries, but in the 3 states, Alabama, South Carolina, Georgia, where Republicans, governors all lost, they got single digits of the black vote, and the black vote was large.
And Koki, the House, isn't Mr. Livingston really in this pragmatic mold?
Yes.
Isn't he going to be someone who's going to try to bring everybody together?
He's completely in that mold, and that's going to be a problem for him with Republican conservatives.
I couldn't agree with you more. People complain that, oh, the African Americans came out in these huge numbers and made the difference. They did. But the answer is, for the Republicans, to go get your share. I don't blame African Americans for voting for candidates that they see as serving their interests. That's what our system is all about. So if you want some of that vote, guys, serve their interests and get it.
But see, this is the problem for the Republican Party also in 2000. If they try to appeal to the narrowest part of their base, they're going to turn off everyone else. And this is a very hard problem.
Don't you think they've learned that lesson now?
It's a problem that the Democrats, look, no, but the Republicans could have learned the cheapest lesson of all time. They still have control of the Senate, control of the House, and a majority of the governorships. And now, instead of, they could have been in a position...
Not just a majority, overwhelming majority.
They have a majority in the House. I think to say they have control is probably going too far. With 6 seats, it's going to be very hard to govern.
They haven't lost the House.
Absolutely.
And they are now in a position where they can have this reevaluation about the party and maybe make some adjustments that will put them in much better position for 2000. If they had won big this time, that wouldn't have happened.
I want to ask Bill a question about African Americans. Before I do, I want to note that Koki Roberts on Monday night said that the Democrats were likely to pick up seats in the House. So, for all the rest of us who were wrong, let's remember that someone was right. Go ahead.
Well, and I was the most wrong, and I do want to say formally that I know that my public comments gave a false impression. I misled people, even including my wife, and I deeply regret that. It was not, it was wrong, it was wrong, it was not appropriate.
When did your prayer meeting?
And I'll be having a counseling session after this show.
Speaking of that, you, George Stephanopoulos, have said impeachment is over. Is impeachment over?
I think it probably is. I say this with some personal regret in terms of justice. One can say, look, it's ridiculous. You lose 5 seats in an off-year election, you gain 5 seats, and your judgment about the constitutional question of whether the president should be impeached changes. It shouldn't be that way. I think it will be that way. I am not sure Republicans have the vote to report out articles of impeachment from the House Judiciary Committee. They could lose the 3 Republicans that they would need to lose to have a minority there.
Well, even
and
if
so I guess my prediction is Starr testifies next week, Hyde moves it quickly to a vote, and they may fail to report out articles
Or
of
they
impeachment.
may have an alternative. They may have 2 alternatives in the
They can't have an alternative.
Sure they can.
Sure they
well,
can.
they can do anything they want.
Right.
But the constitutional process is to see the impeachment process through to votes. And then if the president wins the votes, that's the end. I think that they may report out articles, but they would be credible only if some number of Democrats on the committee join the Republicans, no question. But I'm of the school, and will continue to be of the school, that they'll look at the evidence to see whether they believe this president has committed crimes,
Yes, but
felonies. And if they
They've done
think
it,
he's...
Sam.
Hold on. If they think he's committed felonies, they have a problem in their vote. If they think he hasn't,
You know,
it's
I
all
actually
over.
think this creates an opportunity for the Speaker, Speaker Gingrich, a final opportunity. Everybody wants this to end in this Congress. If there aren't the votes for impeachment, can the Speaker, as a final act, craft some sort of a bipartisan resolution for some appropriate punishment to say that no president
well, but now
is
what
above the law?
about that? Will the Democrats then
That's the
go
interesting
along with
question.
it?
Or-
Now are they feeling very cocky?
Well, there's Democrats and Democrats. I think the House Democrats probably still believe that some sort of punishment is appropriate. The view in the White House may be far different.
And you've got Democrats now who are very beholden to Bill and Hillary Clinton.
Absolutely. Well, but I still think you could get a majority of Democrats, will get a majority of Democrats for some sort of punishment. They're bothered by the president's behavior. Convincing the White House is a different matter.
If Newt Gingrich puts that together, does that then become something that is unacceptable?
Well, Henry Hyde has already said, being a man truthful about this and therefore at a considerable disadvantage, he says that he has constitutional scruples, that perhaps the House shouldn't be in the business of jerry-building these resolutions of moral sentiment of no particular effect. And he's right.
Well, George, you're talking about appropriate punishment. The House can, the Senate can do anything they want, I understand. But if they're following the impeachment process and looking at evidence of accusations of crimes, it's hard to see what the punishment is, short of the same kind of punishment other people get. On 2020 this Wednesday, we're showing the case of 3 people who were sent to the penitentiary because they lied about sex
And
in a civil suit.
You're leading it right to one possible compromise. Suspend the statute of limitations on the president, allow him to be tried when he leaves office for his personal, for the accusations against him. That is different from saying, did he commit an impeachable offense in office?
George, Bill, do you think that
interesting.
the idea
Very
is to get this done before the new Congress and start the new Congress fresh leadership, fresh ideas, all of that?
Oh, yeah, and I think that'll happen.
And then the big question is the year 2000, because we have just ended one election and another has begun. 2000, what happens now? Everybody's already talking about front runners, George W. Bush and Al Gore. Is that right?
Well, let me just, on the Republican side, you all were anointing the moderate Republicans as the victors of this election.
Pragmatic Republicans.
Pragmatic, I know. They don't like to...
They're conservatives, a lot of those
Some
guys.
of them are, but I think that fight will play out in the presidential process. It will not play out in this House leadership fight, I suspect. They want to get this done. Livingston's acceptable to most. He looks like he's the front runner. There'll be personal fights at the second and third levels, but this is not going to be the place where the future of the Republican Party is fought out over the next couple of weeks. It will be the presidential race. The Republican Party in Congress is going to be pretty timid, I would say. They can't govern anyway. They only have a 6-seat advantage in the House. They'll be playing defense. Bill Clinton's going to stand up in January of '99 and propose Patient's Bill of Rights, campaign reform. Republicans are going to be trying to figure out how much do we have to give him. But the race in 2000 will be a real Donnybrook for the soul of the party, and I don't believe conservatives accept the view that, gee, we have to suddenly become moderate or pragmatic.
The soul of the party. I'm trying to figure out if it has a soul. I mean,
well, we'll see.
What makes American parties like cockroaches hard to extinguish is that they're very simple mechanisms, and I'm not sure they've been ensouled. I don't think there'll be a great battle for the soul of the Republican Party. I think Al Gore will concentrate the Republicans' minds on winning. They really think that he would be a dangerous president. And therefore, I think he's the presumptive nominee, and I think it's George Bush's to lose, and this titanic Armageddon over the soul of the Republican Party may not happen.
Yeah, the vice president was a big winner Tuesday night. He was the top campaigner, 200 appearances, and all of his primary opponents lost their rationale. on Tuesday night. Dick Gephardt now has a chance to be Speaker. Jesse Jackson wants to run, but all these African Americans voted for the Clinton-Gore approach on Tuesday. So I think the Vice President is in the catbird seat.
Well, I think George W. Bush is certainly the front runner. But gosh, I remember in 1990, you knew, because you were there, but a lot of people didn't see Bill Clinton coming. And in 2 years, a long time. John McCain may emerge. I think he wants to run. There are a lot of other Republicans, many of them I think attractive, and in the mainstream of their party who would like to run.
And not only that, we all remember President Muskie, President Glenn, President... Right. So I think that anointing people this far out is a mistake. I'm going to be very interested to see, though, what the Democrats do when they don't have Newt Gingrich to kick around anymore. Every time they've gotten in trouble the last few years, and they haven't had any ideas of their own, they've just trotted out Newt Gingrich. They're going to be in a little bit of trouble now.
That's exactly right, Coach. You know what? Let's enjoy it for the week.
Well, you can, George. Sam and I are going to be back with one of those men who didn't become president but has become a hero, John Glenn, in a moment.
John Glenn, hero, legend, great American, came back to Earth yesterday from his second visit to space. And this morning at a news conference, for the first time since landing, he spoke about this last visit. Here's some of what he had to say.
Action end of it, I got great satisfaction the first time out of just being up there and being the first one to do this for our country. And here I am all these years later. I'm very, very proud and have a great sense of satisfaction of participating with such a great crew as this. This has really been an outstanding crew.
I think he looks great, Sam. And I must say, he's given a shot in the arm to the space program twice now.
And those of us who are becoming older Americans, we love him.
Well, tonight, 2020 Sunday with Barbara Walters and Diane Sawyer investigates cemetery owners who defraud grieving families. That's 2020 at 9 o'clock Eastern.
And for the latest in the battle for the Republican leadership, watch World News Tonight Sunday with Carol Simpson at the dinner hour. ABC's coverage of the story continues tomorrow on Good Morning America with Lisa McCree and Kevin Newman. Well, that's all for this Sunday. Until next week, that's this week. Okay.
I'm saying, speaking of getting older,
This Week with Sam Donaldson and Cokie Roberts has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source. ABC News, now always on.